To help my best friend, I married his 35-year-old sister. Everyone said I'd lost my mind. There's a reason she's still single. What do you get out of this? All I could think about was that he saved my life. This was a favor I had to return. On the first day of our marriage, I found out why she'd been single for so long. It wasn't her. It was that every man who wanted to marry her was completely out of his league. 01. An absurd decision, I married Nora Evans, my best friend Ben's older sister. She's 35. The day we went to City Hall, my mom nearly flipped the dining room table. She pointed a finger at my nose, her voice so sharp I thought it would shatter my eardrums. Leo Miller, are you out of your mind? You're treating some 35-year-old spinster that nobody wants like she's a treasure you just dug up? There's got to be something wrong with her. If it's not physical, it's mental. That was pretty much the reaction from all my friends and family. They looked at me with a mix of pity, bewilderment, and confusion. Leo, do you owe the Evans family a ton of money or something? What's in it for you, man? That she's old? That she's weird? I said nothing. I couldn't explain it. Because even I had to admit, the whole thing was completely absurd. I'm Leo Miller, 28 years old. My career is taking off, and I'm not hard on the eyes. In the dating market, I guess you could say I'm a pretty good catch. And Nora, 35, no real job to speak of, practically zero social life. In everyone's eyes, she was the textbook definition of an old maid, the kind nobody wanted. I married her for one reason and one reason only. I owed Ben Evans my life. 3 years ago, a rebar cage collapsed at a high-rise construction site downtown. Ben shoved me out of the way. His leg was shattered, and he still walks with a limp. The long scar across my chest is a constant reminder of that debt. So when Ben, his eyes bloodshot and smelling of whiskey, begged me, I couldn't say no. Leo, man, I'm begging you. Marry my sister. My parents are going crazy. They set her up on dates constantly, and she turns every single one of them down. The tension at home, it's suffocating. You could cut it with a knife. You're my best friend. Help me out. Just pretend, okay? Like it's an act. If she's married and moves out, my parents can finally breathe again. I'll owe you for life, man. I'll do anything. A life for a life. It was a debt that outweighed everything. I couldn't refuse. And just like that, Nora and I, two people who had barely exchanged a dozen words, were husband and wife. There was no wedding. We just went to the Cook County Clerk's office and signed the papers. When they took our picture, we were standing a foot apart. The photographer had to tell us, could the bride and groom move a little closer, a few times before we awkwardly shuffled toward each other. In the photo, Nora's face is a complete blank. Not even a forced, polite smile. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair tied back in a neat bun. Clean but plain, like a glass of water. That was the only impression I had of her. After we got the certificate, Ben pulled me aside and tried to slip a bank card into my hand. Leo, there's 20 grand on here. It's from my parents. Consider it her dowry. Take care of my sister for me, all right? I pushed the car back. I told you, I'm paying you back. This has nothing to do with money. Ben's eyes got red again. I glanced over at Nora, who was standing a short distance away. She was perfectly still, like a tree, completely out of sync with the noise and bustle around us. I sighed internally. An act, then. Let the show begin. I took her back to my two-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. The car ride was just as silent as before. I'd ask a question. She'd give a one-word answer. Do you need to stop and buy anything? No. What do you want for dinner? Anything. The air was thick with an awkwardness, so heavy I could practically hear my own heartbeat. When we got home, I carried her suitcase into the guest room. You can have this room. I'll take the master. Is that okay? She nodded and said, thank you. And then, nothing. She closed the bedroom door and didn't come out again. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the empty space, feeling lost for the first time in my life. What had I gotten myself into? That's what my mom called unleashing a fresh torrent of accusations. I hung up with a splitting headache. It wasn't until late that night that the guest room door finally opened. Nora emerged, already changed into pajamas, holding a folder. I need you to look at this. She handed it to me, her voice flat. I took it. The cover read, Marital Agreement. I was stunned. I thought she would cry, or throw a fit, or at least make some demands of me, her new husband. But she didn't. She just handed me a cold, legal document. I took a deep breath and opened it to the first page. The very first clause floored me. 02. The Marital Agreement Clause 1. During the term of the marriage, both parties will remain financially independent and will not interfere in the other's finances. I stared at the line, reading it 3 times to be sure. My eyes weren't playing tricks on me. It was there in black and white, crystal clear. I had assumed this whole marriage was essentially a charity case, that I was using the institution of marriage to rescue a desperate, aging woman who had run out of options. The attitude of Ben and his parents had only confirmed that assumption. But this agreement was like a slap in the face. I read on. Clause 2. The husband shall provide lodging. The wife shall pay the husband $1,500 on the first of each month for rent and shared living expenses. Clause 3. Neither party has the right to interfere with the other's personal work, social life, or privacy. Clause 4. Household chores will be shared equally or, upon mutual agreement, may be performed by one party in exchange for financial compensation from the other. Clause 5. No physical contact of any kind shall occur without the explicit consent of both parties. The last section detailed the terms for divorce. If either party requested a divorce, the other must comply unconditionally. The division of assets will be based on premarital wealth and individual income earned during the marriage. There would be no commingling of property. The entire document was logical, clear, and perfectly articulated. It was less a marital agreement and more of a flawless roommate contract. There wasn't a trace of dependency, entitlement, or calculation in it. Only absolute rationality, fairness, and distance. She wasn't looking for a savior. In fact, she had proactively cut off every possible avenue through which I could be taken advantage of. I looked up at Nora. She stood across from me, her expression as calm and still as a frozen lake. If you find the terms acceptable, please sign it. It's in duplicate. We'll each keep a copy. My throat felt dry. Do you always live like this? She seemed surprised by the question and paused for a moment. Yes. A single word. No further explanation. I picked up a pen and signed my name at the bottom of the agreement. A storm of emotions churned inside me. I couldn't tell if it was disappointment or relief. Or maybe, just maybe, a sliver of shame. It seemed I had underestimated her from the very beginning. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I woke to the aroma of food. I thought I was dreaming. I lived on takeout. The stove in my kitchen was practically an antique. I walked out of my bedroom to find the table already set for breakfast. Oatmeal, scrambled eggs, and 2 small, neatly arranged side dishes. Nora was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, pouring milk. The morning light streamed through the window, wrapping her in a soft glow. She heard me and glanced over. You're up? Go get ready. It's almost on the table. Her tone was so natural, as if we were old friends who had known each other for years. I nodded, feeling a little dazed. Sitting at the table, I took a spoonful of the oatmeal. It was creamy and perfectly cooked. This was not the work of a woman who was detached from the world. You're a really good cook, I said, genuinely impressed. I'm used to it, she replied flatly. After breakfast, she cleared the dishes efficiently, then took a sheet of paper from her bag and taped it to the refrigerator. It was a schedule and division of labor chart. Using 2 different colored pens, it clearly listed our respective responsibilities for chores, cleaning, grocery shopping, and everything else. It was detailed down to who took out the trash on which day of the week and when the deep cleaning was scheduled. My areas, her areas, and common areas were all perfectly delineated. I stared at the chart, which was as comprehensive as a corporate management policy, and was utterly speechless. She didn't need someone to take care of her. She was a world-class project manager. Just then my phone rang. It was my mom. A feeling of dread washed over me. Hello, Mom. Where's that wife of yours? Is she up yet? Did she make you breakfast? You tell her to call me and pay her respects right now. That's how it's done. My mother's voice was a machine gun, firing words. I shot an awkward glance at Nora, who had obviously overheard. I was trying to figure out what to say when she walked over, picked up a notepad and a pen from the counter, and quickly scribbled a sentence on it, holding it up for me to see. Mom, we just got up and we're about to head out. She's a little shy. I'll bring her over to see you in a couple of days, once she's more comfortable. I read the lines verbatim into the phone. On the other end, my mom's anger seemed to subside slightly. Well, you'd better teach her some manners. Don't let her be clueless about how things work. I will, Mom. After hanging up, I let out a long sigh of relief. Thanks, I said to Nora. She shook her head and wrote another note on the pad. That's a temporary fix, not a solution. You need to establish your own boundaries. I looked at her, stunned once again. She always managed to cut straight to the heart of the matter. My mother's controlling behavior had been the biggest headache of my life, but I had never once thought of it in terms of boundaries. Ping. A text from my mom came through. Don't think I don't know you're just putting me off. Do you want that project of yours to fall through? Mark Thompson's son is still waiting for an introduction. My stomach dropped. Mark Thompson was the CEO of Apex Solutions, the biggest client on my current project. To bend me to her will, my mother was actually threatening my career. 03. She seemed to know everything. My mother's text landed like a boulder in the pit of my stomach. I had been working on this project for over 6 months, pouring countless hours and all of my energy into it. If it fell apart because of this, all that effort would be for nothing. The look on my face must have been grim. Nora glanced at me. Trouble at work? I nodded and handed her my phone. I felt ashamed. A 28-year-old man, still having his career held hostage by his mother. After reading the text, she didn't show any of the contempt or pity I expected. Her brow just furrowed slightly. The client is Mark Thompson? Yeah, from Apex Solutions. And he's giving you a hard time because of your mother? My mom plays bridge with his wife. They're close. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration. She's always like this. She uses her connections to control me. My team has already revised our technical proposal 5 times, but Thompson's people keep finding issues. They're just dragging their feet. I'm pretty sure my mom is pulling strings behind the scenes. I expected her to offer a few words of comfort, or, like my mother, blame me for not being capable enough. But she did neither. Instead, she asked a question I never would have anticipated. Can I see your technical proposal? I was taken aback. Why would you want to see that? It's internal company material. It's really complex. I want to see where the problem is, she said, her tone calm, but carrying a weight that was impossible to argue with. As if in a trance, I went to my room and came back with my laptop. I opened the PowerPoint presentation that had been the source of so much stress. It was filled with data flow diagrams, system architecture charts, and technical modules. She pulled up a chair and sat next to me. I figured she was just humoring me. To my surprise, she studied it with intense focus. Her eyes darted across the screen, her fingers occasionally tapping on the table, as if she were running calculations in her head. After about 15 minutes, she stopped. I'm done. So, I asked instinctively, not really expecting anything. She was quiet for a moment, as if organizing her thoughts. Then she spoke. Your proposal has 2 fatal flaws. I felt a jolt. First, your logic loop is broken. You're missing an efficient buffering and validation mechanism between your front-end data collection and your back-end processing. She pointed to a flowchart on the screen. Look here. The data comes in and goes directly to the analysis module. The moment you have a surge in data volume or an anomaly, your entire system will crash. I followed her finger, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. My team had discussed this exact issue in meetings, but we never found a good solution. The second problem is your user journey design. It's too redundant. It takes 7 steps for a user to get from registration to completing the core action. 3 of those steps could easily be consolidated. You've only considered the technical implementation, not the business cost or the user experience. Every extra step you add, you lose 20% of your users. Do the math. What's your final conversion rate going to be? Her words were like a scalpel, precisely dissecting every weakness in my proposal. These were not observations an outsider could make. This required incredibly deep professional knowledge and extensive project experience. Dumbfounded. How do you know all this? She didn't answer me directly. She picked up a pen and a blank sheet of paper from the table and started to draw. Her hand was steady, the lines clean and fluid. Within minutes, a brand new system architecture diagram took shape on the page. For buffering and validation, you can add a message queue. It'll handle peak loads and allow for asynchronous decoupling. The user path can be optimized like this. 3 steps, straight to the core function. Also, your cost analysis is off. The cloud server configuration you've chosen is overkill for the initial phase. It's a complete waste of money. You should consider using containerization like Docker and Kubernetes for elastic scaling. It could save you at least 40% on costs. She explained as she drew, her pace unhurried, but every word landing with authority. I looked at the diagram, logical, elegant, and utterly flawless. Not even the CTO at my company could find fault with this. In fact, it was better than anything our CTO could have produced. And then I understood. I finally completely understood why she was 35 and still unmarried. It wasn't because there was something wrong with her. It was because the men who wanted to marry her weren't even in the same universe. Her professional expertise, her logical mind, her ability to see to the very core of a problem. It was enough to make most men feel utterly inadequate in her presence. And those men, unable to face that gap, would resort to slapping on superficial labels like too old or weird personality to mask their own ignorance and shallowness. I looked at the woman before me, and for the first time, I felt a powerful surge of curiosity and a hint of awe. Who in the world had I married? You can try presenting this proposal. She pushed the paper toward me. I'm confident that a professional client won't turn down a plan that will generate more profit for him. I picked up the sheet of paper. It felt as heavy as lead. Tomorrow, I would use this to shut everyone up. I was going to blow them all away. And it was all thanks to my wife. The woman everyone said had a problem. 04. The fatal counterattack. I was up before dawn the next day. I'd barely slept a wink, spending most of the night incorporating the architecture diagram Nora drew and all her optimization points into my PowerPoint. I went over every detail again and again, even role-playing all the potential questions the client might throw at me and using Nora's logic to formulate the answers. The deeper I dove, the more astounded I became. Her proposal wasn't just an optimization, it was a paradigm shift. She had completely demolished my team's foundational logic and built something entirely new in its place. A model that was more efficient, more robust, and significantly cheaper. It was at least 5 years ahead of our current thinking. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my eyes shadowed with dark circles, but a fire was burning inside me. I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I put on my most expensive suit. Before I left, I saw Nora. She was already back from a morning run and was in the kitchen making breakfast. Seeing me, she asked calmly, "Ready?" "Yeah." I gave a firm nod. "Remember," she said, handing me a glass of warm milk, "you're not going there to ask for his approval. You're going to inform him that an opportunity to make a lot more money has just landed on his desk. Your confidence comes from the value of your proposal, not from anyone's connections." I downed the milk in one gulp. The warmth spread through my stomach, igniting my entire body. "I get it." I grabbed my briefcase and turned to leave. Her voice, cool and clear, followed me out the door. "I'll be waiting for good news." The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. Mark Thompson sat at the head of the table, his face an unreadable mask as he watched me. His technical team stood behind him. My colleague sat beside me, looking nervous. They all assumed I was here for another dressing down. "Well, Mr. Miller, what kind of surprise have you brought us today?" Thompson's tone dripped with unconcealed sarcasm. I ignored his attitude. I fired up the projector and got straight to the point. "Mr. Thompson, I admit our previous proposals had many shortcomings. After working through the night, my team has developed an entirely new version. I'm confident it will address all of your concerns." My opening caught everyone off guard, including my own team. They had no idea what I had up my sleeve. I didn't give them time to react. I immediately displayed Nora's architecture diagram. This is our new system architecture. We've introduced a message queue mechanism to completely eliminate the risk of a system crash under high concurrency loads. At the same time, it allows for asynchronous decoupling of services, providing infinite scalability for the future. The moment I finished, one of Thompson's technical leads behind him frowned. "A message queue? Which one are you planning to use? RabbitMQ? Kafka? Have you considered the maintenance costs and data consistency issues?" It was clearly an attempt to throw me off balance. A sharp question, but I was ready. This was all part of the cram session Nora had given me last night. "We recommend RocketMQ," I said, meeting his gaze, my voice steady. "First, it's been battle-tested by Alibaba during their Singles Day sales, handling trillions of transactions, so its stability and performance are unquestionable. Second, It has the best support for transactional messages, which guarantees the highest level of data consistency. And third, its documentation and community support are extensive, making problem-solving more efficient. It has the lowest total cost of ownership. My answer was clear, professional, and irrefutable. The tech lead opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, Thompson's expression shifted. He straightened up slightly in his chair. My confidence soared. I moved on to my second bombshell. Regarding the user journey, we've made a revolutionary optimization. I showed the simplified 3-step flowchart. By reducing the process from 7 steps to 3, we can theoretically increase user conversion by at least 60%. Every single optimization is backed by a clear data model. A few quiet gasps could be heard around the room. Thompson's tech team started whispering among themselves. Their expressions had changed from skepticism to surprise, then to outright disbelief. Finally, I addressed the cost. We are introducing a containerized deployment solution. By using Kubernetes for service scaling, we can save the company 40% on server costs in the initial phase. As the business grows, we can achieve near-instantaneous scaling to perfectly handle traffic spikes. When I said the last word, the entire conference room fell into a dead silence. Everyone was stunned by the vision I had laid out. A technically flawless, commercially lucrative, and extremely cost-effective solution. It was an offer no one could refuse. After a full minute, Mark Thompson, the client who had been making my life hell, smiled at me for the first time. He stood up, walked over to me, and clapped me firmly on the shoulder. "Leo, my boy, this proposal," he seemed to be searching for the right word. Finally, he just said 3. "It's brilliant. We're going with this plan. No, we're going to do it to an even higher standard. Double the budget. We need talent like you." I had done it. Armed with the weapons Nora had given me, I had fought and won a spectacular victory. After the meeting, my colleagues stared at me as if I were some kind of alien. "Leo, when did you get this good? That architecture diagram was a stroke of genius. Have you been taking secret advanced courses or something?" I just smiled, offering no explanation. All I wanted was to go home, to share the good news with the woman who had made it all possible. I had never been so desperate to see her. 05. Boundaries and curiosity, I practically ran all the way home. The moment I opened the door, I was greeted by the faint, delicious smell of cooking. Nora was in her loungewear, sitting on the sofa, reading a book. It was a dense, academic-looking volume on quantum physics, entirely in English. The sunlight pouring through the sliding glass door illuminated her, making her look as serene as a painting. She looked up when she heard me come in. "You're back." Her gaze was calm, as if she had expected this outcome all along. It worked. I couldn't contain my excitement any longer. Thompson approved it on the spot. He even doubled the budget. My colleagues were completely blown away. I was practically bouncing on my feet, like a kid who'd gotten a perfect score on a test and was desperate to show his parents. She just smiled faintly. It was a small smile, but it sent ripples across her usually placid face. I expected as much. A professional proposal will always earn a professional's respect. She closed her book and stood up. "Go wash your hands. Dinner's ready." Her reaction was far more subdued than I had imagined. But that very calmness was what shook me even more. To her, solving a problem that had stumped my entire team was nothing more than a trivial matter. Who was this person? Sitting at the dining table, I watched her ladle soup into my bowl. Her movements were graceful and unhurried. I couldn't help but speak. "Nora, what did you used to do for work?" It was the first time I had ever tried to probe into her past. Her hand paused for a fraction of a second. "I worked on a few projects." Her answer was vague, deliberately avoiding the core of the question. "What kind of projects?" I pressed. "Related to technology and business models." She placed the soup bowl in front of me, clearly signaling the end of the conversation. Just then, my phone rang. That same, familiar number. My mom. My heart instantly tensed up. But this time, it felt completely different from yesterday. There was no more guilt, no more fear. I answered the phone. "Lau, you think you're something special now, don't you? What did you do to Mark Thompson? His wife just called me, gushing about how impressed her husband is with you. What kind of tricks did you pull?" My mother's voice was as shrill as ever, but the confidence behind it was noticeably weaker. She wanted to tear into me, but realized she'd lost her biggest bargaining chip. I glanced at Nora. She was eating her dinner quietly, as if the shouting on the phone had nothing to do with her. But her words from yesterday echoed clearly in my mind. You need to establish your own boundaries. I took a deep breath and spoke in a tone of unprecedented calm. Mom, I didn't pull any tricks. I just convinced my client with a proposal that was professional enough. This is my job, and I would appreciate it if you didn't interfere anymore. Silence on the other end. I could almost picture my mother's stunned, incredulous expression. This was the first time in my 28 years that I had ever explicitly defied her. What did you say? How dare you talk to me like that? Mom, I respect you, but my work is my work, and my life is my life. I need my own space. I'm married now. I'm an adult. I understand you have issues with Nora, but please give us some time. I'll bring her to see you when the time is right. That's all. I'm eating dinner. And before she could respond, I hung up. The world went quiet. I let out a long, slow breath. It felt like a mountain that had been crushing my chest for years had finally been lifted. I had never felt so light. Across from me, Nora put down her fork. She looked at me, and for the first time, her eyes held an expression I could only describe as approval. Well done, she said. The first step in setting a boundary is a clear refusal. Her validation made me happier than landing a billion-dollar contract from Mr. Thompson. It was a strange feeling. I was starting to realize how much her opinion mattered to me. After dinner, I took the initiative to do the dishes. According to the chart on the fridge, it was her turn. I'll get it tonight, I said. Call it a celebration. She didn't argue. She just nodded and went back to the sofa with her book. In the kitchen, the water ran as I scrubbed the plates, my mind replaying the day's events. It was surreal. In just 24 hours, my career and my family dynamics had been completely transformed. And the source of it all was the woman named Nora. My wife. A stranger, in the legal sense of the word. My curiosity was like a weed, growing wildly, impossible to suppress. How did she know so much? Why was she masquerading as an ordinary spinster? Why did she agree to this ridiculous marriage with me? What had happened in her past? I dried my hands and walked out of the kitchen. I saw her leaning against the sofa, her eyes closed. She must have gotten tired from reading. Her long eyelashes cast soft shadows on her cheeks. Without the alert, distant look she usually wore, she seemed vulnerable. On impulse, I softened my steps and moved closer. I knelt beside her, watching her quietly. It was the first time I had ever observed her from this close. Her skin was flawless, her nose elegant, her lips beautifully shaped. She wasn't a stunning, head-turning beauty at first glance, but she was captivating. The more I looked, the more I saw. Just then, my eyes fell on her phone, which she'd left on the coffee table. The screen was still on, displaying a chat interface I didn't recognize. It was entirely in English. A new message had just come in from a contact named Is. Nien, the next round of funding for Genesis is locked in. Everyone in the valley is waiting for you to come back. Genesis? Silicon Valley? My heart seized. Those words, together, carried an overwhelming amount of information. Who was she? 06. A visitor in a crack. That message left me frozen, my mind reeling. Silicon Valley. Funding rounds. Genesis. These words belonged to a world completely alien to me. A world that belonged to Nora. And I knew nothing about it. She must have sensed me staring. Her eyelashes fluttered, and her eyes slowly opened. A flicker of surprise crossed her face when she saw me kneeling in front of her, but it was quickly replaced by her usual calm. Is something wrong? I shot up, trying to cover my awkwardness. No, nothing. I just saw you were asleep and was worried you might get cold. It was a clumsy excuse. Her gaze drifted to her phone screen, still lit up. She picked it up and nonchalantly turned off the screen. There wasn't a hint of panic in her movements, as if what I'd seen was as trivial as a weather report. The more composed she was, the more my suspicions grew. She offered no explanation. I asked no questions. An invisible wall of silence, familiar and distant, rose between us again. But something had changed. I knew it, and so did she. That weekend, Ben came over. He was carrying bags of expensive groceries and fruit, his face a mixture of guilt and concern. Now, Nora, just came to see how you guys are doing. He walked in and started wringing his hands nervously. So, my sister, she hasn't been giving you too much trouble, has she? He asked, pulling me aside to whisper. His eyes were full of sympathy. Clearly, in his and his family's minds, I was suffering through some kind of ordeal. I looked at Nora, who had quietly taken the fruit and was heading to the kitchen to wash it. Then I looked back at Ben's apologetic face. The situation was absurd. Trouble? She had solved my biggest trouble. No, I said, shaking my head. My tone was serious. Your sister, she's great. Ben was stunned. He had probably prepared a whole speech to console me, only to find it completely unnecessary. Really? She hasn't done anything to you? Like what? I asked back. I was just worried about her. You know, her strange moods. She doesn't talk much, keeps everything bottled up. I was afraid she'd drive you crazy. Ben sighed. She's been like that since we were kids. All the other girls were playing with dolls, and she was taking apart radios. Then she went to study abroad, and we'd be lucky to get a call once a year. We never knew what she was doing over there, or if she was okay. A few years ago, she just showed up back home, no explanation. She wouldn't get a job, just stayed home. My parents were at their wits' end. Ben's rambling accidentally revealed several key pieces of information. Studied abroad. Came back a few years ago. It all seemed to line up with that text message from Silicon Valley. What did she major in overseas? I asked, trying to sound casual. Computer science, I think. I'm not really sure. Something with all that coding stuff, Ben said, scratching his head. Of course. My heart began to beat faster. Just then, Nora came out of the kitchen with a platter of washed fruit. She set it on the coffee table. Have some fruit. She glanced at Ben. How are Mom and Dad? It was the first time she had ever brought up her family to me. That they're okay. They just talk about you a lot, Ben said, seeming a little intimidated by his own sister. Tell them not to worry. I'm doing fine, Nora said. Her tone was flat, but Ben's eyes suddenly reddened. Nora, that's the problem. You never tell us anything. Are you still mad at Mom and Dad for making you break up with him? Ben's voice trailed off at the end. The word him landed like a stone in the calm waters of my mind. For the first time, Nora's expression changed. It was a complex mix of sadness, frustration, and exhaustion. It was gone in a flash, but I saw it. Let's not talk about the past. She picked up an apple and began to peel it in silence. The atmosphere in the room instantly grew heavy. I could feel that this was a forbidden topic for them, a secret I wasn't meant to touch. Ben, realizing his mistake, clammed up, looking remorseful. To break the awkward silence, I jumped in. Hey, how's your leg doing? Is it healing up okay? I pointed to his injured leg. Much better, thanks to you finding the best doctor for me, Ben said gratefully. It just aches a bit when it rains. Let me see. Nora, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. She put down the apple, walked over to Ben, and knelt. She gently rolled up his pant leg, revealing the scarred skin beneath. Her fingers pressed lightly on several points around the scar. Does it hurt here? Yeah, a little. What about here? That hurts too. It's nerve and fascia adhesion. You need physical therapy. Her tone had switched into another mode entirely. Calm, professional, and authoritative. Exactly like when she was analyzing my technical proposal. I'll write you a recovery plan. Follow it, and you should be 90% recovered in 3 months. She stood up, found a pen and paper, and quickly sketched out a series of professional medical terms and diagrams of rehabilitation exercises. Ben and I just stared, dumbfounded. Nora, how do you know about this stuff too? Nora didn't answer. She just handed the sheet of paper to Ben. Do the exercises, and don't slack off. Ben held the paper like it was a royal decree. He looked at his sister with a new sense of awe and unfamiliarity. It was the same look I had on my face after my successful meeting. We were the same. We both thought we knew her. But in reality, we knew nothing at all. After Ben left, the apartment was quiet again. I looked at the woman on the sofa, who had picked up her quantum physics book once more. A voice screamed in my head. Ask her. Ask her who she is. Ask her who he was. Ask her why she gave up Silicon Valley to come back here. But my rational mind stopped me. Our marriage was a transaction, governed by an agreement filled with clauses and boundaries. I had no right to pry into her private life. And yet, for the first time, that agreement made my heart ache with frustration. I realized that the clear, dividing line it had drawn was beginning to crack, ever so slightly, inside of me. 07. The uninvited guest the rest of that Saturday afternoon passed in a haze of anxiety. The past that Ben had accidentally brought up had set off a series of aftershocks in my mind. Nora remained quiet all afternoon, shut away in her room. I knew that beneath her calm exterior, a storm was brewing in a world I couldn't access. And I could only stand outside the door. The feeling made me, for the first time, resent the marital agreement. It was a wall, one that was supposed to protect us, but was in fact isolating us. In the evening, the doorbell rang. It was a series of sharp, impatient jabs. I thought it was a food delivery, but when I opened the door, I saw the last person I wanted to see. My mother. My meek, quiet father trailed behind her. Leo Miller, you've really outdone yourself. My mother stormed past me without a second glance, her eyes scanning every corner of the apartment with a critical air, like a queen inspecting her territory. It's not a big place, but at least it's clean, she announced. Where is that woman? Hiding in her room? Her tone made it sound like Nora was some kind of vermin. A hot flash of anger shot through me. Mom, why didn't you call before you came? Do I need an appointment to visit my own son's home? She slammed her purse onto the sofa. I'm here today to see exactly what kind of witch has gotten her hooks into my son, so deep that he doesn't even listen to his own mother anymore. My dad tugged at her sleeve. Honey, maybe not so loud. You shut up. No one asked you, she snapped, shaking him off. Just then, the guest room door opened. Nora stepped out. She had changed into a fresh set of loungewear, her hair neatly combed. There was no trace of emotion on her face. She looked at my mother calmly, without a hint of fear or a need to please. Hello, ma'am, she said, her voice quiet but clear. My mother looked her up and down, her gaze as invasive as an X-ray, filled with judgment and disdain. So you're Nora? Yes. 35? Yes. And I hear you don't have a real job? I'm currently a freelancer. Huh, a freelancer? What a nice way to put it. My mother sneered. You mean a freeloader, don't you? My son works his tail off to build a life, not to come home and worship some gold-digging princess. At your age, you should be trying to have a baby, not playing these little games. Her words grew uglier with every sentence, each one a needle pricking at my conscience. I couldn't take it anymore. Mom, that's enough. I stepped in front of Nora. If you have a problem, you take it up with me. Nora is my wife, and I expect you to respect her. Wife. My mother laughed, as if it were the funniest joke in the world. You ask her if she's worthy of the title. An unemployed old maid who's already past her childbearing prime? What gives her the right to marry into the Miller family? She'll do nothing but drag you down. She'll ruin you. I was trembling with rage. I never knew my mother's prejudice ran this deep. I was about to argue with her, but Nora gently tugged on my sleeve. She stepped out from behind me and faced my mother once more. Ma'am, everything you've said, I admit. Her opening statement stunned both my mother and me into silence. I'm 35, which is, I agree, advanced in age. I do not currently have a stable job, and it's true that I haven't brought any material wealth to Leo. However, her tone shifted, her eyes sharpening. Have you ever stopped to think about what your goal is here? My mother was taken aback. My goal? My goal is what's best for my son, of course. Is it? A barely perceptible smirk touched Nora's lips. If you truly wanted what's best for him, you wouldn't have threatened him with his biggest client at a critical moment in his career. If you truly wanted what's best for him, you wouldn't storm into his home just as he's starting a new family, intent on destroying his marriage. And if you truly wanted what's best for him, you wouldn't stand in front of him and attack the wife he chose with the most vicious words imaginable, forcing him into an impossible position between being a good son and a good husband. Nora's words were delivered slowly, but each one was a bullet hitting its mark. The color drained from my mother's face. You're talking nonsense. I'm not, Nora continued. You're not doing this for his own good. You're doing it because you're addicted to control. You're afraid of him leaving your orbit, of him having his own life, of him no longer being the obedient son who hangs on your every word. Your love is conditional, and it is suffocating. And that suffocating love is pushing him further and further away. Today, you can force your way into this apartment. But tomorrow, he might move somewhere you can never find him. And then, you will have truly lost everything. The living room fell into a dead silence. My dad stared at Nora, dumbfounded. My mother's lips trembled, but she couldn't utter a single word. Nora's rebuttal was brutal. There was no shouting, no name-calling. She had simply, with the cool precision of a surgeon, dissected my mother's every pretense, exposing the deep-seated fear and selfishness underneath. After a long moment, my mother let out a shrill scream. "You're insane. You're a crazy person." She snatched her purse from the sofa and scrambled toward the door. "We're leaving," she yelled at my dad. My dad looked at me, then at Nora, sighed, and followed her out. The door slammed shut, and the apartment was finally quiet again. I looked at Nora, who had just won a war I'd been losing for 28 years. There was no joy of victory on her face, only a quiet exhaustion. "I'm sorry," I said, stepping closer. "You didn't deserve that." She shook her head. "It's not your fault." She paused, her gaze meeting mine. "Leo, remember this. The most important thing for an adult is to take responsibility for your own life. Not to live up to anyone else's expectations. Not even your parents." In that moment, looking into her clear, deep eyes, I had a startling thought. Maybe I didn't marry her to repay a debt to Ben. Maybe she was sent here to save me. 08. The dusty box after my mother's chaotic retreat, she didn't bother us for a long time. My world became peaceful. Life with Nora fell back into the rhythm dictated by the chart on our fridge. We had our separate lives, shared the chores, and stayed out of each other's way. Everything was the same, and yet everything felt different. The air between us was no longer just awkward and distant. There was something else there, something I couldn't quite name. A kind of understanding, perhaps, or a silent, mutual curiosity. I started observing her subconsciously, the books she read, the music she listened to, the intense focus on her face when she was working. She was an enigma. The closer I got, the more I realized how little I knew. Her knowledge spanned a breathtaking range of subjects. From financial modeling to art history, from social psychology to astrophysics, she seemed to know something about everything. Sometimes when I hit a wall at work, I would tentatively ask for her opinion. She always offered a completely new perspective, an angle I had never considered. It felt like I was a rookie player who had suddenly been assigned a max-level expert as a personal coach. My curiosity about her grew daily, mingled with a feeling I was reluctant to admit, even to myself: admiration. One Saturday afternoon, it was my turn for the deep clean. Nora was out, saying she was meeting a friend. As I was cleaning her room, I found a small wooden box under her bed. It wasn't locked, but a thin layer of dust suggested it hadn't been opened in a very long time. My heart began to pound. I knew I shouldn't pry. The agreement was clear about privacy. But my hand seemed to have a mind of its own, reaching out uncontrollably. I opened the box. Inside, there were no photos or old love letters as I might have imagined. Just a few odd items. An MIT student ID card. The photo showed a much younger Nora, her hair in a ponytail, her eyes shining with a rebellious spark. A small, simple silver ring that looked inexpensive. And a neatly folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a draft of a stock transfer agreement. Party A, Nora Evans. Party B, Julian Vance. Asset transferred, 45% of the original shares of Genesis AI Incorporated. The transfer was to be made without compensation. My mind exploded. Genesis AI. The name sounded familiar. I immediately ran out of the room and grabbed my laptop. With shaky fingers, I typed Genesis AI Julian Vance into the Google search bar and hit enter. Countless articles flooded the screen. Silicon Valley's new star, Julian Vance, sets the tech world on fire with Genesis AI. The trillion-dollar startup from a garage. The genius team behind Genesis AI. An exclusive interview with Julian Vance. I owe my success to the most important person in my life. I clicked on one of the articles. It featured a photo of Julian Vance. He was devastatingly handsome, dressed in a turtleneck sweater, exuding an air of sophisticated confidence. The article detailed how he and his team had, in just 3 years, turned an unknown startup into a global AI behemoth. In the section describing the team, I saw a familiar, yet foreign name: co-founder and chief technology officer, CTO Nian Gu. A small bio followed: a graduate of the MIT AI lab, architect of the foundational Genesis system, and widely recognized as a programming prodigy. Nian Gu. Nora Evans. Gu Nian was her name in Chinese. The mouse nearly slipped from my grasp. I stared at the name on the screen, a name that was essentially a transliteration of her original one, and thought of the face on the MIT ID card. It all clicked into place. The text from S, the him Ben mentioned, the one who had broken her heart, and this priceless stock transfer agreement. This man, Julian Vance, hailed by the global tech media as the next Steve Jobs, was Nora's past. He was the reason she had given up a world of glory to hide away in this small city. I kept scrolling. In an old thread on a tech gossip forum, I found a shocking post. The real story of Genesis, the so-called genius couple, was actually a massive betrayal. The post alleged that nearly all of Genesis AI's core technology was the work of Niangu. Julian Vance was the charismatic frontman, skilled at fundraising and public speaking. They were the golden duo, college sweethearts who everyone thought would end up together. But on the eve of the company's IPO, Niangu was suddenly pushed out. All the shares in her name were voluntarily transferred to Julian Vance, and then she vanished completely for Silicon Valley. Some speculated she left willingly. Others claimed Julian had schemed to force her out and take sole control. A third rumor was that Julian's wealthy family disapproved of her middle-class background and had orchestrated the breakup. The theories were many, but the outcome was singular. Julian Vance had climbed to the top of the world on her shoulders, and she had been cast into the abyss, broken and betrayed. I closed the laptop. The room was silent, save for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I finally understood. I understood why she said she was currently a freelancer. I understood why my mother's insults had rolled right off her back. I understood why she had agreed to this sham of a marriage. How could someone who had once stood at the pinnacle of the world care about the opinions of those at the bottom of the mountain? How could a woman who had single-handedly built a trillion-dollar empire care about what my mother considered a real job? She wasn't unmarriable. She was just so deeply wounded that she had sealed herself off from the world. She didn't need a husband. She needed a shell, a quiet place to hide from the storm. And I, through this marriage, had unwittingly become that shell. I looked at the stock transfer agreement in my hand. Billions, maybe tens of billions of dollars in wealth. She had just given it all away. For the first time, my heart ached with an overwhelming sense of protectiveness. Just then, I heard a key in the lock. Nora was home. 09. I know your Nora was back. She was holding a grocery bag with milk and vegetables. She paused when she saw me in the living room, her eyes falling on the open wooden box and the stock transfer agreement on the coffee table in front of me. Her expression froze. The air in the room seemed to evaporate, leaving a vacuum. We stood several feet apart, just looking at each other. The moment stretched into an eternity. I saw her hand, hanging by her side, clench into a fist. A tiny, nervous gesture. So she'd get nervous. She wasn't the impenetrable fortress I thought she was. I was the one to finally break the silence, my voice hoarse. I found it when I was cleaning. The excuse sounded pathetic even to my own ears. She didn't say anything. She just walked over, set the grocery bag on the floor, and reached for the agreement and the box, intending to put them away. Julian Vance. I said the name out loud. Her body went rigid. I stood up, walked over to her, and looked directly in her eyes. This time, I didn't back down. The founder of Genesis AI, a global tech icon, Niangu, the prodigy from MIT, the architect of the Genesis system. That's all you, isn't it? With every word I spoke, the color drained from her face. By the time I finished, her lips were pale. For the first time, I saw panic in her eyes, the raw, unguarded look of someone whose deepest secret, whose most painful scar, has been laid bare for the world to see. She was no longer the composed, all-knowing Nora. She was just a woman, one who could be hurt, who could be afraid. You investigated me? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. No, I said, my gaze unwavering. I just want to know who I really married. And now I know. I married a woman the world has wronged. My words were like a key, unlocking a dam she had held back for years. Without warning, her eyes reddened. A single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek, landing on the stock transfer agreement and blurring the ink. It was the first time since I'd met her that I had ever seen her cry. So, she wasn't incapable of tears. She just refused to show her vulnerability to anyone. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. The pain was sharp and tense. I reached out and gently, with a pat of my thumb, wiped the tear from her face. My movements were slow, careful, filled with a tenderness I didn't know I possessed. She didn't pull away. She just stood there, letting me touch her. We had never been this close. I could smell the faint, clean scent of her hair, feel the cool touch of her skin. Why? I asked softly. Why transfer it for free? That empire was yours. She was silent for a long time, so long that I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she finally spoke, her voice laced with an infinite weariness. Because he said he would never be at peace otherwise. He said the success was crushing him, that he couldn't breathe. He said all he wanted was to be an ordinary person with me. And I believed him. Those few sentences told a story of devastating betrayal and deception. I could picture it. A man putting on his most loving face, whispering the most beautiful lies, and cheating her out of everything. Her career, her love, her future. And then, casting her aside without a second thought. It was monstrously cruel. Him and your family, I asked, finishing the question Ben had left hanging. His family looked down on my background, Nora said, a bitter, self-deprecating smile on her lips. My parents thought his family could give us advantages, so they told me to just endure it. I refused. And so, here we are. So that was it. Betrayed in her career, deceived by her lover, and pressured by her own family. Pummeled by this triple blow, she was left utterly broken. That's why she had run. She ran from Silicon Valley, from her past, from everything. She disguised herself as an ordinary, even weird, spinster, using indifference and distance as a shield to protect a heart that was already in 1,000 pieces. I looked at her, at the forced strength in her eyes and the deep, hidden pain behind them. I couldn't control my emotions any longer. I took a step forward and gently pulled her into a hug. Her body was stiff, resistant. I didn't hold her tightly, just offered her my chest as a place to lean, a place to rest. Nora, I whispered into her ear, my words slow and clear. From now on, you don't have to carry this alone. It's over. It's all over now. I didn't know if she would push me away. I was half prepared for her to punch me for being a creep. But she didn't. Her rigid body slowly, bit by bit, began to relax in my arms. After a long time, I felt a warm, damp spot spreading on my shoulder. She had buried her face against me, and she was crying without a sound. On the wall of our living room, that cold marital agreement was still taped up. It clearly stated, no physical contact of any kind shall occur without the explicit consent of both parties. But in that moment, holding this trembling woman in my arms, I knew. That agreement, as of this second, was null and void. 10. A new covenant. The hug lasted a long time. Or maybe it was only a few minutes. In that moment, time ceased to have meaning. All I knew was that the woman in my arms was no longer an iceberg. She was warm. She trembled. She wept. Her silent tears on my shoulder eventually subsided, and everything returned to a quiet calm. Slowly, she pulled away from me. Her eyes were red, like a frightened rabbit's, but they were brighter than I had ever seen them. It was as if a storm that had been building for years had finally passed, and the sky was beginning to clear. Thank you, she said, looking at me with sincere gravity. These two words carried more weight than any time she'd said them before. I knew this time she wasn't thanking me for getting her out of jam. She was thanking me for giving her a moment to finally let her guard down. I'll make dinner. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her steps a little unsteady. I watched her go. Her silhouette was slender, but no longer so alone. I didn't offer to help. I knew she needed some space right now. Instead, I quietly gathered the wooden box and the stock agreement from the coffee table. I put the box back under her bed, right where I'd found it. But I knew some things could never go back to the way they were. Like the wall between us. Dinner was quiet. Neither of us mentioned Julian Vance or Genesis AI. But we both knew the forbidden topic was now out in the open. Like an elephant in the room, we were choosing to ignore for the time being. After we ate, she didn't retreat to her room, as usual. She made 2 cups of tea and handed one to me. We sat on the sofa, separated by a throw pillow. The TV was on, playing some mindless drama, but neither of us was watching. So, what's your plan now? I finally broke the silence. I wasn't trying to pry into her business secrets. I was just concerned about her. She cradled the warm mug in her hands. I don't know, she said, shaking her head softly. For the last few years, all I've wanted to do is one thing. Not think, not do anything. I understood. When you're hurt that deeply, the only thing you can do is stop. Stop thinking, stop feeling, stop everything. It's a form of self-preservation and a form of slow suicide. And now, I asked, do you want to keep living like that? She fell silent. The steam rising from her tea blurred her face. I thought I could, she said in a low voice. I thought if I just found someone to marry, played the part of an ordinary person, I could forget the past. But it doesn't work. Some people, some things, they're carved into your bones. You can't forget. My heart ached for her again. No words of comfort seemed adequate in the face of her pain. Just then her phone buzzed. The one I'd seen the message from S on. She glanced at the caller ID, and her brow furrowed. She took the phone and walked out onto the balcony, sliding the glass door shut behind her. I could faintly hear her voice through the glass. She was speaking rapidly in English, a language I couldn't follow. Her tone sounded agitated. I didn't eavesdrop. I just sat there, waiting quietly. It felt like I was a husband, waiting for his wife. The feeling was strange and reassuring. 10 minutes later, she finished her call and came back inside. Her face was grim, even more so than when she had been talking about Julian. Is something wrong? I asked. She nodded, then shook her head. She sat back down on the sofa and drank the rest of her now-cold tea in one go. An old friend of mine, she explained, taking the initiative. She said Julian is about to release Genesis 2.0 next month. Even without a technical background, I knew what 2.0 signified. A major upgrade. Isn't that a good thing? I asked, confused. It means the company is doing well. No, her eyes turned to ice. I finished the core algorithm for the upgrade before I left. But that version has a fatal backdoor. I put it there intentionally as a failsafe to prevent the technology from being stolen. Only I know how to disable it. Julian doesn't. I understood instantly. A chill ran down my spine. So if he pushes the 2.0 release, the entire system will suffer a catastrophic failure on the 7th day after launch, she said, each word deliberate and heavy. Every company integrated with the Genesis system, all of their data will be irrevocably locked. It would be a global internet disaster. I was too shocked to speak. I couldn't even begin to imagine the horror of such a scenario. Countless companies bankrupted, millions of people jobless. The world's digital infrastructure could grind to a halt. Is he insane? I stammered. Why would he do that? He's not insane, Nora said, looking at me with a complex expression I couldn't decipher. He's trying to force me to come back. He knows I wouldn't stand by and watch that happen. Because Genesis, it's like my child. And now, he's using my child to threaten me. I finally got it. This was Julian's most vicious move yet. He didn't want to destroy Genesis. He wanted to destroy Nora. He wanted to drag her out of the shadows, force her back into the world that had hurt her, and bring her back under his control. So what will you do? I asked, my throat dry. Will you go back? She didn't answer me. She just stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Her silhouette against the night sky was one of grim determination. After a long moment, I heard her say, almost in a whisper, if he wants to play, I'll play. This time, I'm not running away. What's mine? I'm taking it back. 11. The undercurrent, the moment Nora said those words, her entire demeanor changed. Before, she was like an ancient sword hidden in its sheath, sharp, but with its brilliance dulled by dust. Now, the sword was drawn. Its edge was cold, and it radiated a palpable sense of danger. She locked herself in her room that night and didn't come out. I didn't disturb her. I knew she was planning a war. Her own, personal war, waged across the Pacific Ocean. When I saw her the next morning, I was startled. Her eyes were bloodshot, but her gaze was terrifyingly sharp. 2 laptops were open in front of her, their screens a cascade of data streams and code scrolling by an impossible speed. Her fingers flew across the keyboards, a blur of motion. On the table lay a sheet of paper covered in English, a list. I leaned in for a closer look. It was a series of company and personal names I didn't recognize. Next to each name was a complex diagram detailing things like ownership structures, technological dependencies, and cash flows. What's all this? I asked. The first wave of partners for Genesis 2.0, she answered without looking up. Julian's allies, or more accurately, his hostages. I'm going to take out a few of their wheels before he can chain them completely to his war chariot. Her tone was calm, but her words sent a shiver down my spine. What she was planning was to unleash a storm in the highest echelons of global tech and finance. And she was going to do it with nothing but herself and 2 laptops. Do you need any help? I offered, knowing full well that in her world, I probably wasn't even qualified to be an assistant. She finally paused, looking up at me. Make me a coffee, please. I immediately went to the kitchen. I had never felt that the simple act of making coffee could be so sacred. I brought the mug to her. She took it and drank a large gulp. Now, she suddenly said my name. Yeah, this is going to be dangerous. Julian's influence is far greater than you can imagine. If he finds out about our relationship, he might come after you. It's not too late to back out. I looked at her exhausted face, held up by sheer willpower. I smiled. When I married you, everyone said I was crazy. Looks like they were right. Siding with a genius to take on the world, it is pretty crazy. I paused, then said one word at a time, but I like it. Her gaze wavered for a second. The wall of ice she had just rebuilt seemed to crack again. Okay, was all she said. But that one word meant acceptance. From that moment on, I was no longer an outsider. I was her first ally. In the days that followed, our apartment transformed into a makeshift war room. She commanded the digital front, weaving alliances and setting traps in that invisible world with lines of code and a series of encrypted calls. I handled logistics. I made sure there were 3 meals a day, kept the apartment clean, and took care of every little thing so she could focus without distraction. We didn't talk much, but our unspoken synergy grew stronger every day. Sometimes, all it took was a look, and I knew if she needed water or coffee. Sometimes, I'd place a plate of food in front of her, and she would eat automatically while her eyes remained glued to the screen. The chore chart on the fridge was long forgotten. We were starting to feel like a real couple, like partners facing a crisis together. I still went to work during the day, but my mind was always at home. I started using my own network to dig up information on Julian's U.S. business operations. The more I learned, the more horrified I was. The man's investment portfolio was like a cancer spread across dozens of industries. Companies that seemed completely unrelated had his shadow lurking behind them. He was like a giant octopus, his tentacles reaching into every profitable corner of the market. And his methods were ruthless. The founders of the companies he acquired or invested in almost always ended up ruined, either sidelined or forced out completely. He didn't just consume profits, he consumed people. I compiled everything I found and sent it to Nora. Her reply was brief and chillingly calm. As expected, a man who would turn on his own partner would have no mercy for anyone else. There was no resentment in her tone, only the cold, hard clarity of someone who sees things exactly as they are. On Friday evening, I was working late when I got a text from her. Tonight, the first shot. My heart leaped. I immediately made an excuse to my boss and rushed home. When I got back, she was sitting in front of her computer, watching a live global financial news broadcast. A well-dressed anchor was reporting on a breaking story with breathless urgency. Shares of Cloud Sail, one of America's largest cloud service providers, are in free fall after a massive security breach was just revealed. The vulnerability could potentially expose the core data of millions of corporate clients. In after-hours trading, Cloud Sail stock has plummeted by more than 40%. The market is in a state of panic. I was stunned. Cloud Sail. I knew that name. I had seen it on her list. It was the very first one. Was that you? I asked, walking over to her, my voice dry. She didn't confirm or deny it. She just pointed at the screen. Cloud Sail is the most important cloud provider for the Genesis 2.0 system, and Julian's staunchest ally in North America. Now, that ally can't even save itself. She picked up her coffee mug and took a small sip, her eyes like those of an elegant, ruthless predator. This is just the opening act. The game is just beginning. I looked at her, this woman who could send shockwaves through Wall Street from her living room, and I no longer felt an ounce of pity for her. All that was left was awe and a fervent, burning admiration. My wife. She wasn't a damsel in distress who needed my protection. She was a queen, about to reclaim her throne. 12. Return of the Queen. The cloud sale implosion was just the beginning. Over the next week, the global tech industry was rocked by a series of earthquakes. First, a top European chip manufacturer was hit with a massive patent infringement lawsuit, threatening its very existence. Next, a key Japanese materials supplier suffered a catastrophic supply chain failure, forcing a halt in production for dozens of tech companies worldwide. On the surface, the afflicted companies seemed unrelated, scattered across different countries and sectors. But I knew they had one thing in common. Their names were all on Nora's list. They were all Julian's allies. Nora operated like a phantom, an avenger hiding in the deepest corners of the internet. She never showed her face, never left a trace. She simply used her supercomputer of a brain and an invisible network connection to find the precise weakness of each opponent. And then, with a gentle push, another seemingly indestructible corporate giant would come crashing down. The process was silent, subtle, and utterly devastating. Julian's coalition began to crumble. The Genesis 2.0 launch event was indefinitely postponed. I could only imagine the chaos and fury unfolding on the other side of the Pacific. He must have hired the world's best hackers and investigators to find the mysterious force orchestrating his downfall. But he would never find it, because his greatest adversary was, at that very moment, sitting in a nondescript apartment in Chicago, wearing a simple set of loungewear. She was eating the oatmeal I'd made her while directing a global corporate war from her laptop. The absurdity of it was overwhelming and exhilarating. That night, Nora finally closed her laptops. She stretched her arms out long, a rare, relaxed smile gracing her lips. Phase 1 is complete, she announced. I've cut off 70% of Julian's external support. He's now on an island. What's the next move? I asked. I realized that, without even noticing, I had fully embraced the role of her confidant. Next, she looked at me, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. Next, we make some money. Money? I was confused. That's right. She turned to her other laptop, which displayed a complex stock market chart. War is won on information asymmetry. I knew which companies were going to fall and which ones were going to rise before anyone else in the world. For the past week, I've been shorting all of his allies' stocks and buying up shares in their competitors. She pointed to a number in the bottom right corner of the screen. It was followed by a very long string of zeros. I had to count them 3 times to be sure. It was an astronomical figure, the likes of which I had never seen in my life. You made all this in just a few days. My voice cracked. She nodded, as if discussing the price of groceries. This should be enough capital for the next phase of the battle. I was speechless. The modest savings I had painstakingly built up over years of hard work wasn't even a rounding error compared to this. I had once thought I was doing her a favor, saving her from a life of destitution. I now realized I was the one who needed saving. You seem a little down, she asked, noticing my unease. No, I denied it instantly. I feel a little useless. Compared to you, it feels like there's nothing I can do. It was the truth. The feeling was crushing. To be a man and feel so completely outmatched by his wife, in intelligence, in capability, in wealth, was not a pleasant experience. She listened, then shook her head. You're wrong. She looked at me, her expression serious. Leo, you're far more important than you think. These last few days, without you, I probably wouldn't have eaten a single proper meal. I might have passed out from low blood sugar at my desk. I might have spiraled back into self-doubt and fear with no one to talk to. You gave me a stable home base. You let me know that I wasn't fighting alone. It's not that you can't do anything. What you do is something no one else can. Her words were a warm current, flooding my entire body and washing away the last dregs of my insecurity and frustration. So that's how she saw me. And besides, she added, a rare blush creeping onto her cheeks, I need your help with the next phase. My help? I couldn't believe it. Yes. She nodded. Julian has a very important stronghold in the U.S., a tech company called North Star Dynamics. It handles a lot of his less-than-legal business. It's his primary vehicle for moving assets and laundering money in the States. I want to acquire it. Acquire it? I gasped. How is that even possible? North Star is a star in the domestic market, worth tens of billions, and it's famously private, never takes outside investment. The founder, David Zhou, is a notorious eccentric. He's impossible to deal with. I know, Nora said. But I also know something else. David Zhou is currently facing a massive technical crisis. His core product has a bug that his entire team of engineers can't fix. If it goes on any longer, the company will collapse. How do you know that? I asked instinctively. She smiled. Because I'm the one who wrote the bug. What could I say? All I could do was offer a silent, 3-second prayer for the man named David Zhou. I need you to give me a meeting with him, Nora said, looking at me. Using your new status as the Golden Project Manager from Apex Solutions. Go to him and propose a potential technical collaboration. Your only job is to get him in the room. Leave the rest to me. I understood. Her plan was seamless. First, she creates the problem. Then, she appears as the savior to solve it. And in the end, she walks away with the entire company. Okay, I said, nodding firmly. My heart began to race, not with nerves, but with pure, unadulterated excitement. I knew a great show was about to begin. And this time I wasn't just in the audience. I was stepping onto the stage as the co-star, right alongside my queen. 13. David Zhou's chess game, getting a meeting with David Zhou, was surprisingly easy. The Apex Solutions name carried a lot of weight, and my recent spectacular success with the Thompson project had given me a bit of a reputation in the industry. I sent an email proposing a discussion on next-generation hybrid cloud architecture. The bait was perfect. Zhou was currently being tortured by his technical crisis, and he couldn't afford to ignore any potential lifeline. We met in the top-floor conference room of his company headquarters. A floor-to-ceiling window offered a panoramic view of the city's bustling financial district. David Zhou was in his 40s, dressed in a Mandarin collar shirt. He looked sharper and more arrogant than in his photos. He poured me a cup of tea with practiced ease. Mr. Miller, a rising star. He began, his tone dripping with condescending politeness. I heard about your work on the Apex project. Impressive proposal. Thank you, Mr. Zhou. I replied with a smile, maintaining a calm and equal footing. This was just the opening gambit. He wanted to control the conversation. Let's not waste time, Zhou said, leaning back on the sofa and steepling his fingers. Apex wants to partner with us. I get it. But let me be clear. Northstar will not be opening up our core technology. Not a single line of code. The most you can do is work on peripheral channels and applications. In other words, you can help us sell our products. His words were blunt and dismissive. He was treating me like a door-to-door salesman. I didn't get angry. I just smiled, exactly as Nora had instructed. Mr. Zhou, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here to discuss a partnership. Oh, he raised an eyebrow, a flicker of interest in his eyes. Then why are you here? I'm here to give you a gift. I took out my laptop and opened it. I didn't launch a PowerPoint. I just typed a single, short line of code onto the blank screen. Then, I turned the laptop toward him. Mr. Zhou, does this look familiar? At first, his expression was one of pure disdain. He probably thought I was an amateur trying to show off. But when his eyes fell on that line of code, his pupils contracted violently. The color drained from his face in an instant. He shot up from the sofa and snatched the laptop from me. But every command he entered returned the same result. Error. Access denied. Oh, who the hell are you? He demanded, looking up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. His carefully constructed arrogance had vanished completely. Like I said, I'm here to give you a gift, I replied, leaning back on the sofa and adopting his earlier posture of relaxed confidence. Now, can we have a real conversation? About what? His voice was a dry, raspy whisper. About acquiring Northstar Dynamics. Acquiring? Zhou looked like he'd just heard the world's sickest joke, but he couldn't manage to laugh. On what grounds? On the grounds that I can turn this multi-billion-dollar company of yours into a pile of worthless data overnight. As the words left my mouth, the conference room door swung open. Nora walked in. She was wearing a simple white trench coat, her long hair falling loosely over her shoulders. She had no makeup on, but the moment she entered, the entire energy of the room shifted. Zhou looked at her, his expression moving from confusion to shock, and finally to the kind of terror reserved for seeing a ghost. Niangu, he stammered, his voice barely audible. So, he not only knew her, but he also knew exactly what that name meant in their world. David, it's been a while. Nora said calmly. She walked over to Joe and took the laptop from his hands. Her fingers danced lightly across the keyboard. On the screen, the bug that had been plaguing Joe's company vanished. The system returned to normal. The entire process took less than 10 seconds. It was as effortless as a miracle. Joe collapsed back onto the sofa, utterly defeated. He knew he had lost completely. Why? He asked, his gaze fixed on Nora, his expression a tangled mess of emotions. I've been with Julian for 10 years. He trusted me. I know. Nora pulled out a chair and sat down, her posture elegant and poised, like a queen about to take possession of a conquered city. I also know you're holding 3% of his offshore Genesis shares for him. I know that your company's servers contain a record of all his dirty dealings for the past several years. If I were to hand this information over to the SEC, what do you think would happen to Julian? And what do you think would happen to you as his accomplice? Beads of cold sweat formed on Joe's forehead. Every word from Nora was a sledgehammer, shattering what was left of his defenses. So I'm going to give you two choices, Nora said, holding up two fingers. 1, I destroy your company and release all this evidence to the public. You and Julian go down together. Or 2, she paused, her eyes locking with his. You sell me North Star along with those account books. I'll give you a price you can't refuse. You take the money, you leave the country, and you never come back. Your business with Julian Vance will be over. You get a fresh start, a clean slate. The conference room was deathly quiet. I looked at Nora amazed. I never knew a woman could be so powerful. She wasn't making threats. She was simply stating a fact that she had personally engineered. David Joe closed his eyes, his face a mask of exhaustion and despair. After a long time, he opened them again and looked at Nora. I'll take the second option, he said, his voice heavy. When do we sign the papers? 14. The final showdown, the acquisition of North Star Dynamics, happened so fast it felt like a dream. With David Joe's full cooperation, all the legal paperwork and asset transfers were completed within 48 hours. When Nora signed her name on the final page of the thick acquisition agreement, I knew she had just sounded the charge for the final assault. She had captured Julian's most important chess piece in America. And with it, she had acquired all the evidence needed to send him to hell. That night, after it was all done, we were sitting in the living room as usual. The news was on, filled with breathless reports about the mysterious capital firm that had just acquired North Star. The entire media landscape was speculating about the identity of the buyer. No one could have possibly guessed that the person who had just shaken the entire American tech industry to its core was at that moment wearing teddy bear pajamas, sitting cross-legged on a sofa, and eating apple slices I'd cut for her. He's going to call, Nora said, her words muffled by a piece of apple. I know, I nodded. The quiet before the storm is always the most unnerving. Sure enough, at midnight, the encrypted phone rang. The screen displayed a number from the United States. Nora put on speaker. The room was silent. We could hear the heavy sound of breathing on the other end after the call connected. Nien, a man's voice, magnetic and gentle, filled the room. It had the kind of charm that could make any woman's heart melt. It's been a long time. Just from the sound of his voice, I could picture Julian Vance, sophisticated, charismatic, and alluring. It was no wonder the Nora of the past had given him everything. Julian, Nora's voice was as cold as ice. What do you want? A soft chuckle came from the other end, still so direct. I have to say, I'm impressed by what you've done. It's like a perfect work of art. You never cease to surprise me. He sounded like a professor critiquing a student's work. The deep-seated arrogance and need for control were still there. I thought you would come to me as soon as you resurfaced. I never expected you to choose this method to get my attention. Well, you succeeded. Tell me, what is it you want? To come back to me? Or do you want your shares in Genesis back? Just say the word. I can give you anything. I was stunned by his shamelessness. Even now, he thought this was all just a game to get his attention. He still thought he could act like a king, bestowing favors upon her. The man's ego was pathological. Nora laughed. It was a soft, cold sound, dripping with sarcasm. Julian, have you forgotten? Genesis was always mine. I don't need you to give me anything. I'm going to take it back myself. The breathing on the other end hitched for a second. Nien, don't be like this. His tone finally shifted. I know you're still angry with me. I was wrong about what happened back then. But you have to understand, I had no choice. Without my family's backing, Genesis wouldn't be where it is today. Why can't we go back to how things were? You handle the tech, I handle the business. We can still be the world's most perfect partnership. He was playing a sympathy card. It was disgusting. With you. Nora's voice was filled with revulsion. Julian, are you even worthy? That sentence was a knife that plunged straight into Julian's heart. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for so long I thought he had hung up. When he finally spoke again, all the warmth and pretense were gone, replaced by a cold, naked threat. Niangu, I suggest you don't push your luck. You really think taking over a small-time company like North Star is enough to bring me down? Don't forget, you still have family. That brother of yours with a bad leg, and those parents of yours who love money more than anything. If I wanted something unfortunate to happen to them, it would be easier than crushing an ant. He had finally shown his true, ugly colors. My gut clenched, and I instinctively tightened my grip on Nora's hand. Her hand was ice cold. I could feel a faint tremor run through her body. It wasn't from fear. It was from pure, unadulterated rage. I squeezed her hand harder, trying to transfer my warmth, my strength to her. She felt it. She turned her head and glanced at me. The ice in her eyes thawed, just for a moment. She took a deep breath and turned her attention back to the phone. Julian, her voice was calm again, but it was the calm of a volcano about to erupt. Do you think I'm the same Nora from 3 years ago? The one you could manipulate so easily? Do you think threatening my family will make me back down? You're wrong. You touch a single hair on their heads, and I promise you, you will spend the rest of your life in a prison cell. The files David gave me are more than enough. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to tell you. I'm married now. As she said this, she looked down at our intertwined hands. A small smile played on her lips, a smile full of power. I'm doing very well. The man I'm with is 1,000 times better than you. He's taught me what real love and respect are. You just make me sick. So now, I'm giving you 24 hours. Call a global press conference, tell the world the truth about what happened, and give me back what is mine. Then, get out of Genesis. Otherwise, this time tomorrow, every dirty secret about you and your family will be on the front page of every news outlet in the world. And that backdoor into Genesis 2.0, I'll open it for everyone online to see. The choice is yours. With that, before Julian could even respond, Nora ended the call. The world went silent. I looked at her, this woman who had just delivered an ultimatum to one of the most powerful men in the world. I knew the war was about to end, and regardless of the outcome, she had already won. She had won back her dignity and her life. 15. Our Genesis in the end, Julian Vance folded. 1 hour before Nora's deadline expired, he held a live, global press conference. The man on the screen, once hailed as a tech god, looked like he had aged 20 years overnight. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He confessed to the world's media that he had stolen Nora's work and used despicable means to force her out of the company she built. The world was in an uproar. A seismic shockwave tore through the tech industry. Genesis AI's stock plummeted into an abyss. The Vance family name was dragged through the mud, their reputation destroyed. Julian fell from his pedestal, his legacy forever tarnished. And the name Niangu, in a blaze of glory, returned to the world stage. Every media outlet was scrambling to find her. Everyone wanted to know where this reclusive genius had been hiding. But Nora had turned off all her devices. She drew the curtains, shutting out the clamor of the world. The war was over. She was tired. She slept for 2 straight days, like a child who had completely exhausted all her energy. I didn't disturb her. I just checked on her every few hours, tucking the blanket around her. Looking at her peaceful, sleeping face, my heart was filled with a sense of calm and contentment I had never known. She woke up at dusk. The last rays of the setting sun slipped through a crack in the curtains. She saw me sitting by her bed and smiled. It was the softest, most gentle smile I had ever seen from her. "I'm hungry," she said. "I made you some soup." I brought her the bowl of chicken noodle soup I had been keeping warm on the stove. She ate slowly, 1 spoonful at a time. "What's next?" I asked her. "Are you going back to Silicon Valley to take charge of your empire?" She shook her head. "I don't want to go back. That place is too cold. The soup here is much better." My heart skipped a beat. "Then what about Genesis?" "I've already delegated it to a professional team. We'll establish a new board, hire a CEO I can trust. I'll retain my shares and veto power. For now on, I'll just focus on the research I love. From home. When she said from home, her eyes never left mine. I felt my face flush. And what about us? I finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been burning in my mind. Our marital agreement. I think it might be expired. She put down the bowl and looked at me, her eyes sparkling like a starry night sky. Lau. She said my name. Yeah. Do you think I'm old at 35? I was stunned by the question. No, not at all. Do you think I have a weird personality? No, not at all. Do you think living with a woman like me would be boring? No. I answered perhaps a little too eagerly. Being with you is an adventure. Every single day. It's the most exciting and the best thing I've ever done in my life. She smiled, a genuine, childlike smile. She got out of bed, walked over to a drawer, and took out the marital agreement we had signed. Then, right in front of me, she tore it in half, and then into smaller and smaller pieces. Lau. She held out her hand to me. I'm Nora Evans. I'm 35 years old, unemployed, with no house, no car, and $1 trillion company as baggage. Will you marry me? One more time? This time, no deals, no debts. Just because I love you. Tears I could no longer control streamed down my face. I pulled her into my arms, holding her so tight, I felt like I could merge her into my very bones. Yes, I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, I love you. In that moment, the sun finally set, and the city lights began to flicker on, one by one. I knew that Julian Vance's genesis was over, and that for Nora and me, our genesis was just beginning. I married Nora Evans, my best friend Ben's older sister. Everyone said I'd lost my mind, but I knew I was just the first person lucky enough to see the brilliant star hidden behind the dust. And now that star was mine, my wife.